I look at today also I look at marketing that way, which means that sometimes when I'm with other marketers, especially in a team effort, I don't really always understand why they think solution first and problem second, right?
We have seen clients, you're paying user acquisition cost anywhere in the range of $3 to $4 or $5 sometimes. Then the customer is not coming back to purchase again your product. And I'm talking about B2C.
Because all SMBs talk to each other all the time, right? So if one SMB tells you that, hey, I'm struggling with this payment gateway, or I'm struggling with this checkout service, five other SMBs will say I had a bad experience, and then the sixth guy will not buy your product. And of course, all buyers are influenced by community. Say, marketers as an ICP, or finance managers as an ICP, or HR managers as an ICP make decisions in silos. SMBs make decisions jointly.
Ideally, we all like to be a holistic, like a CMO kind of material. But I strongly believe in last 3 4 years of my consulting work now is it is important to have a specialization. It is important to have, I believe, grounded with at least one or two pillars, which you can really, really sort of latch onto when everything goes. You can jump into that, fold your sleeves, do your work.
I can tell you, because I'm a full stack marketer, I read every single update that Google and Meta roll out. I also read content changes. I read any improvements in content. I literally am active on every social media channel, and I make time to see what's trending. You can't live without learning if you're a marketer. If you're a marketer, sign up for a life of learning.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Marketing Couch. Today on the Marketing Couch, I have Ayushi Mona Singh. Ayushi is a full stack marketer with a decade of experience across retail, pharma, banking, venture capital, and most recently, logistics with Delhivery. She has worked brands like Novartis, Future Group, Axis Bank, and led marketing for startups and SMBs alike, from zero to one and beyond. But what really sets her apart is a toolbox. It's the mindset. How she doesn't come in with just one playbook. She builds the one your business needs, grounded in deep user research, local insights, and data backed experimentation. In this episode, we unpack why retention marketing is often the most underrated growth lever, especially for SMBs, how to win trust in tier 2 and tier 3 markets in India without a massive budget, and how being outcome driven and not channel obsessed sets great marketers apart. She shares her bold take on freelancing and also her reflections on teaching and why aspiration beats ambition when it comes to building a meaningful career. There is a lot of wisdom here, but also a lot of heart. I hope you will enjoy listening to this episode as much as I have enjoyed recording it. With this, let's dive in. Hey Ayushi, welcome to the Marketing Couch.
Thank you, Jaideep. Thanks for having me.
It is great to see you after almost like what 4 5 months. I think last time we met in a panelist. I think it was ISBR College.
Yes, we met in, yeah, I think that was the last time that we spoke, and I think we were discussing sustainability and marketing and all of that jazz.
Right,
So this is
right.
good. It's good to be on, virtual marketing couch, having this
Absolutely.
conversation with you.
I was awestruck at that time, and I was thinking in my mind, like, whenever I do a podcast, definitely I have to invite you. In fact, if
No,
you
you're very
remember, I
kind.
even no, it's really my pleasure and really, really excited to have this conversation with you. And when I was making my list of guests, definitely your name popped up. So, really looking forward to this conversation. Great to have you.
Absolutely. I think the pleasure is on mine, Jaideep, because I'm very honored that you think that I was worth inviting, right? And thank you so much for all those kind words.
We will talk about it, but I love your content, right? So I love your content on LinkedIn. But before we get there, let's just start at the beginning, right? Before anything, I observed that you have worked in different roles in diverse industries and even worked in different cities as well. What's the secret?
So I think the secret is that I treat life, as an adventure. I don't treat a job as a job, a task, and a list of chores to be done and a list of people to be battled with. I treat work as something that I draw immense pleasure out of. For me, that whole thing of, work is worship, and if you enjoy what you do, you don't have to work a single day in your life. That's very true for me. So for me, I'm very driven by what can I next do that I will enjoy. And a lot of my career decisions hence to somebody who's looking outside and seem very erratic, right? Because how do you go from banking to retail to pharma to venture capital to logistics and supply chain?
Seriously, I mean, when I looked at it, I was like, this is really unique and this is an outlier.
Yeah, so a
So,
lot
was it
of
more like an experiment from your side?
So it's not a conscious experiment at all. A lot of my career has been driven by serendipity, and in that moment, it's a matter of making a choice, right? So you have to weigh in and decide. Okay, if I am in retail and I am doing brand marketing in retail, where will I learn more? Will I learn more if I go to another retail company and become a senior brand manager? Or would I learn more if I go to a regulated industry where corporate communications and advocacy is very, very well done and high quality, and learn from there? So, what I've not consciously done is chosen the industry and chosen the role. But what I've very consciously done is seen how can I increase the width of what I know. Different industries do different subsets of marketing really well. So for instance, SaaS marketers have great attention to detail. They're extremely well integrated with their sales and customer success teams. So when I wanted to understand business really well, I moved to delivery because for me, I had reached a point where I wanted to understand the dhanda and the business side of things and the number side of things, which SaaS marketers get really well. When I wanted to learn how to communicate better and improve the nuances of that, I went to Novartis because they had a global brand and they're extremely detail oriented about it as the world's largest pharmaceutical company. But when I wanted to learn agility and when I wanted to learn like the nitty gritties, I went to retail because retail is so fast moving, there's never a holiday really. So I think I've been conscious about doing different things at different places, but I would not do PR at a retail company. I would not, want to do a business role at a venture capital firm where I'll be a portfolio manager. So I've very consciously chosen to do certain things that certain kind of industries and brands tend to be good at, which is a very deliberate move. But apart from that, role, designation, everything is serendipity. Everything is me just being adventurous and having fun with my time.
Great. So where do you go from here? I mean, what's the future plan? In the sense, it's difficult to, of course, now comment on 10-year plan, but let's say, what's the end goal? I mean, if you have one.
So, I think end goal is a very interesting thing that you asked, Jaideep, and I'm very thankful to you for phrasing it that way also, because people typically ask, so what's your career path? Where do you see yourself, in next number of years? End goal is, I think, a very nice way to also phrase it because I personally believe that, I am somebody who has aspirations, not ambitions. When you have an ambition, your ambition is that, hey, I want to become CMO by the time I'm 40. When you're ambitious, your ambition is that I want to work at the most popular brand, right? But when you have an aspiration, your aspiration is, this is the kind of person I want to become, this is the kind of financial stability I want to have, this is the kind of motivation I want to give people who work with me, and this is how I want to see the brands that I have worked with grow. So I am somebody, when I think about my career and my end goal and my end game, I think about myself very aspirationally. I think about myself as somebody who's left a lot of early stage and young marketers better than they were, which is why I have a continuing commitment to sort of educating people in my spare time and teaching a lot. I see myself as somebody who drives very quick results for brands that she chooses to go and work at. So I like to be delivering from week one. I don't want to wait for the first quarter, um, these are the kind of aspirations I have. So whenever I think long term, also I think aspirationally long term in terms of, am I working with incredibly smart people? right? Am I earning the value that this role and this effort deserves? And am I inspiring the people I work with? Will somebody look at me and say, hey, if she did it, maybe I can also do this, right? And I think that's my aspiration. So I am not very bogged down by what designations look like 10 years hence, because 20 years ago there was nothing called data scientist, 25 years there was nothing called growth hacker, and all of these marketing especially is so fluid, right, that I don't know if 10 years down the line a CMO, a CIO, a CDO, whatever form and shape it takes, right? You don't know. So I think I look at my end goal as being somebody who's defined a set of aspirations that are personal to her
Mhm.
and is accomplishing those.
I think it's a good way to look at it. I would not think of, well, anyway, I would not think of, maybe because of my age, but in general, if I was, say, a 30-year-old now, I would not really look at probably beyond 5 years because the way things are changing. But I think a good way I have been doing practicing is at least last 4 5 years. I used to be someone who used to look at 5 years and beyond, and because of that, I have worked in a couple of large brands for a very long period of time, like 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus years. But last 4 5 years have been more of stay with the journey, stay where you are, and that way you can be so much at present and so much attention that you can actually pay to what you are doing, so much you can draw satisfaction, enjoyment from the moment. I think this has really worked well for me. And the fact that we are so overwhelmed with, whether it is martech, whether it is AI, whether it is so many other things, I think having sight to long term probably is not a wise thing, that at least I would advise anyone, right? So it is good to know that actually you have a certain parameters or standard that you have set for yourself. You're calling that aspiration, which is great, and the focus is still on learning, the focus is on adoption, focuses on experimenting and exploring. So what kind of marketing or marketer you consider yourself? The reason I'm asking this is because, personally for me, that's a question that I have dabbled for a long period of time. Ideally, we all like to be a holistic, like a CMO kind of material. But I strongly believe in last 3 4 years of my consulting work now is it is important to have a specialization. It is important to have, I believe, grounded with at least one or two pillars which you can really really sort of latch on to. When everything goes, you can jump into that, fold your sleeves, do your work. What kind of marketing or marketer you think yourself?
This is a very interesting question. So I think one sort of side effect of having moved through industries and roles is obviously that anybody would think that you have a bit of an identity crisis, right? Because if you've constantly done just digital marketing, then it's so easy to introduce yourself as a performance marketing specialist, for instance, or a demand generation specialist. And while I've not had that, right, I do really enjoy the term full stack marketer and full funnel marketer, because it's something that allows me to express that, if you bring me on board as somebody to help with your marketing efforts, I'll be able to sort almost everything for you. Right now, that doesn't mean I will do everything for you. For instance, if you want a demand generation strategy, right, based entirely off LinkedIn advertising and Microsoft advertising, right, as a B2B brand, am I going to sit and do all of that for you? I can and I will in the initial stages. But then I also know the process to hire the right person or engage a temporary contractor or a permanent, semi permanent situation, and then hand it off. So, to me, what I really associate very strongly with is to think of myself as an outcomes driven marketing consultant. So I'm not a SEO consultant. I'm not a content consultant. I am not a growth consultant. I'm an outcome driven consultant. Different people need different outcomes. And I like to think of myself as somebody driving outcomes. And a lot of that also comes from the fact that I did not start my career as a marketer. I started my career as a product manager. So when you start your career in product,
and
you
and where
always
is
think of.
that?
I was actually a product manager for merchant payment solutions at Axis Bank. And I built uh, everything from EMI on pause to contactless acceptance on pause and payment gateway UI and dynamic currency conversion. A very different world, right? Because you're dealing with developers all the time. You're writing copy, but I was writing PRDs and BRDs. And so my
Mm-hmm.
approach right at the beginning of my career became very business oriented. My user has a problem, what feature do I develop, right? Or what change do I make in this user's journey via XYZ that will help the user solve that problem? And I look at today also, I look at marketing that way, which means that sometimes when I'm with other marketers, especially in a team effort, I don't really always understand why, they think solution first and problem second, right? So very often, if I'm a SEO expert, I will only sell you SEO, and if I'm a creative strategist, I will only sell you the idea of a creative communication built out on, say, organic social. And I think a lot of that has to do with when you become extremely specific as a marketer, you run into that problem of when you are a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So performance marketers think that everything is like numbers and demand capture and demand gen and tofu, mofu, bofu. And brand marketers think of everything as story and emotion and all of that jazz, right? So
Yeah.
have very consciously wavered from not thinking of myself like that, and I very consciously think of myself as an outcome driven marketing consultant. However, you're right, you can't do when you especially speak to a brand or a client, especially a non-marketing client, right? So if I'm not speaking to a brand manager, if I'm speaking to a founder, for instance, a founder doesn't have the patience understand how my outcome driven model works, right? The founder thinks in a mental shortcut of I need somebody to do social media for me, right? They're not going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think one step back. So foundationally and fundamentally, my skill sets and how I have sort of built them is I'm extremely strong at user research. And what I do with user research is something, I mean, I've become fairly
How do you do
comfortable in
user
saying.
research?
Yes, that I think I can do better than a lot of people. So I do a very strong mix of social media listening. I do a very strong mix of keyword analytics, user interviews, empathy driven listening, right? And all of these are catchphrases. Now, all marketers do this. I'm not saying I'm the only marketer who does this, right? Almost every marketer does this. But what I have been able to do with that is that I have been able to drive outcomes from user research. And I'll give you an example of how. So, in one particular role that I had, and this is something that actually was very interesting, we were launching a new product, and this was a product that had already been launched internationally, and the global headquarter wanted us to launch the product with the same communication strategy, positioning strategy, pretty much the same collaterals, and just go after it and grab market share. And I did a localized social media listening and analytics effort, which I did entirely in house. So I did not engage anybody because we didn't have the budget for it, because the global HQ wouldn't approve a budget for something that they did not even want to discuss really. And I basically worked with about 5 million data points and built out a research case study that then I convinced other stakeholders in my organization, and
Which
we
tool have you used?
changed the entire approach for the India market. And this is something that I've actually, like, with the consent of stakeholders,
Uh-huh.
right, presented also, and it was, to me, a very pivotal moment in understanding how even something like user research, nobody ever thinks of user research as uh, anything else but validating what they already know. Very often, especially when you'll see, and this is very common in Bangalore, founders will just jump on Zoom calls, and then you're speaking, they're hearing but they're not listening, they're hearing to filter what they already think they know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's been
Yeah.
something that
That's
I've
kind of a
managed.
biased listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's for, I'll think another example that I can give you about this is
So the one that you mentioned on this million data points, was it part of Novartis or where was it?
I don't want to name the brand because they
All
wanted
right,
me to
that's fine.
anonymize it, but
That's
I'll
fine.
actually send you over the material if you want to see it. It's very interesting.
That's fine. No,
Uh,
that's fine. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's obvious, I mean, for anybody, but I still don't want to
Yeah.
call it out.
Got it. Got it. So just staying on that point, I have, so who is the audience here for a full stack marketer, right? And when you say full stack, to me, that's like your, so, okay, so you say, okay, I have a toolbox, right? Which comes with hammer, screwdrivers, different sizes, Allen keys, everything, right? Tell me your problem, I'll come and fix it. Or let me understand even better that what your problem is. Let me do that market research. Let me listen to what your target audience is saying, what your target market is saying, and then I'll bring the right tool to fix that, or probably even bring in even other tools to make it even a better sort of garden, right? So it's a toolbox approach. So who is the audience here? What type of company you think is required? And I'm asking this consciously is because there'll be a lot of young listeners, right? And I want obviously these points to get through.
The best audience for full stack marketer to cater to are SMBs and startups, simply because A, at very early stages, SMBs either don't have the resources or the exposure to marketing to engage and hire the right people. I have seen founders and business owners hire very indiscriminately. They get stuck with low quality talent, right? Because anybody can make a poster and upload something on social media today, and then they think that's what marketing is, and then their view of marketing becomes extremely tactical. They become very averse to marketing, or worse, they think of marketing as a very non-cerebral and entirely creative function, right? That's not something that, Jedi, people of, our exposure to large brands, right? So if you've worked at like an IBM or a Mo Engage or a Novartis or an Axis Bank, our stakeholders don't think like that. But an average stakeholder who may be doing a lot of revenue and have a profitable business, but does not have a background in marketing or does not have the formal education or exposure to a more corporate setup, right, does not really value marketers today. And they think of marketers as a very creative function. So the biggest value add that any full stack marketer can do, and I feel that really, really next, not just business as an end goal, but also the perception of marketers in the eyes of a lot of business owners, is that space, right? Is that early space. So I would say that for sure. I would say that a full stack marketer's audience is obviously somebody very early. It can be somebody who's in a larger setup,
Mm.
but then the point is that why will I hire a generalist when my entire team is structured as specialists, right? So if my community manager has to work with a full stack marketer, right? The full stack marketer will have a much wider view of everything that the community manager does, and that's going to stand under conflict. And a large company would not want to engage. So I
True.
very consciously also tried to work with people who will value somebody who can do X, Y, Z, and not just X.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I would have thought so, right? I mean, early stage companies or startups or SMBs. And this is exactly the reason I have invited you to this discussion, right? Because I think there's a lot of education required in general, specifically, those founders. And even I know sales colleagues tend to think, beautifying presentation is marketing job, creating collaterals a marketing job, doing sales enablement is marketing job. All of that is marketing job, but there needs to be a
But to
science
what
behind the
end?
art, right? There needs
Yeah.
to be a science behind the art, right? Or there has to be a science next to the art. So it is a science and art both, right? So I think marketers need to be really conscious and careful, in terms of positioning themselves, and also clarifying and educating their stakeholders, their founders, their colleagues as to what really is the pivotal role that marketing plays in this ecosystem, right? The point I was saying is that there is a lot of education required in terms of educating your sales colleagues, your overall go to market team, your founders as to why, the why part of it, right, rather than just the what part of it, right? And I think only marketing is responsible for bringing that why, because in most cases others are doing important job but almost going, nobody's really listening to that, nobody really is finding those truths, nobody is going and understanding what your market is genuinely saying. I think to that extent, it is important for people like you to educate like the full stack marketeers before you bring your tool, right, or get the right tool set. Anyway, so switching from that part, the second part that I wanted to discuss with that is you mentioned that you spent a good amount of time in startups and then SMBs, and then you also worked with larger brands like Axis and Novartis. What is the major difference that you found in terms of style of work, right, as far as marketing function goes? um, uh, and what is the learning that you had from both sides, if you can just summarize this part?
This is a very loaded question, Jaideep. So I've
I
engaged
know.
with SMBs and startups in two capacities. Okay, one is directly right where I am a vendor and a partner and a consultant to them, which is when I worked with early stage startups and when I worked with D2C businesses, largely SMBs, right? So that's one. The other is that even in my large jobs, so when I worked at Axis, for instance, I one of the sort of focus areas I had then also as a product manager was the SMB segment, right? Because they were fairly active in the enterprise segment, and all the product related changes that we were doing was to make the product palatable to SMBs, right? Who, I mean, this is 10 years ago. 10 years ago, digital payments was still nascent and restricted to top tier retail, right? And again, at Delivery, I was part of the SME marketing team. So I worked very, very closely and intensely with, brands, D2C e-commerce brands there, right?
Mhm.
So between, selling to
So if you
SMBs,
don't mind, can you just explain a little more about the specific role that you played? I believe you have had two different roles there, right, in Delivery.
I've had three roles.
You had
Worked.
three roles.
I
Okay.
joined as the digital marketing lead, and then I
Okay.
moved to look at overall brand plus digital marketing for the SME business, right? And the SME business is largely two products there, which is Delivery One and the Delivery app. Post which, for comparatively short amount of time, I was also part of the corporate communications and the media relations team. So
So
that's
what was the outcome expected in this role?
the outcome is always very simple. The outcome is get us more SME customers. See, okay, not just them. I think when you're selling to SMEs, right? Anybody who sells to SMEs, whether it's a Khata book, whether it's a razor pay, SMEs, what do you do with SMEs as a marketer? You get volume, right? Because your enterprise clients are going to eat into your margin. Your SMEs are, your bread and butter in terms of financial stability and health, and a lot of market expansion and brand value actually comes from the average SME knowing about you, and not just strictly enterprise clients. And that's true whether you're selling a payment gateway, that's true whether you're selling a logistics SaaS solution, and that's true whether you're selling an accounting and billing software, right? So it doesn't really matter if you work at a Delivery, a Khata book, Odoo, a razor pay, right? When you're selling to SMEs, your entire intent is generate volume, right? Because for any large company, 5 SME businesses coming on board doesn't make a difference. 5 lakh SME businesses coming on board makes a difference. So a lot of what I was involved in was developing salience for the brand, as a marketer. So which meant doing a lot of events in tier 2 cities. So I would actually just go to places like Ahmedabad, Baroda, Indore, Lucknow, and speak to brands. And I would do that as a marketer and engage them and explain what we do, right? Because you can't be very intellectual with SMEs. They want to see you, they want to build trust, they
So
want
that's
to
kind of
understand.
that's also kind of an activation, right?
Yes, absolutely. So you need to activate them, but you also need to activate them at scale. You need to speak to a lot of them at the same time. So it's always that. And a lot of,
So was
again,
it more of in-person activities or events, or was there some kind of digital outreach or
no, no, it was
digital initiatives
entirely
also?
in person. See, that's the other thing with SMEs, you can, and of course, I mean, we've run digital demand generation programs, and everyone does that. I was actually recently part of, another SME event that I did with another brand, and I realized this that, digital is something that you now use as supplementary when engaging with people, right? And one of the interesting quirks and user insights about SMBs is that a lot of SMBs carry a little more ego than an average enterprise business, right? Because
Oh,
because
yes.
an enterprise business comes with a procurement guy. He knows how he's positioned. He's a corporate employee. His emotions are not attached to the brand. For a SME, his business is his business. It's his dad's business, his grandfather's business. So you better not screw it up for him, right? So I, in my experience also, and I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of SMB businesses, right? All of them are extremely attached to being able to pick up the phone and talk to people even to date. A lot of them are extremely attached to being dealt with in person and being treated more deferentially, because it does make them feel good and does give like a lot of value, and that's something that's not changed. So my first role was to understand pain points of SMB customers and make payment products for them. And my last corporate role before I started consulting was to figure out, how to make SMEs aware of e-commerce logistics beyond, entrenched startup competitors. And they haven't changed. The Indian SMB personality is very much core, right? So they've become a lot more savvier, especially, children of SMB businesses. So for instance, a lot of traditional apparel businesses now, are just spinning off into their own brands. A lot of suppliers, right? Even think of places like Ludhiana and Tirupur and Surat, and all of these places were never places where brands were born, right? But now
Hmm.
a lot of younger people, who have inherited their parents' businesses, have spun this off. And there is definitely this wave of younger people in family businesses who want to
Yeah.
uh, market their business and brand their business, which their parents did not do. And their parents and grandparents were very, very comfortable running legacy businesses that made a lot of money but had no recall. So a lot of
Yeah,
people that
just
I
just
work with
just
are in that space.
one question I wanted to park while you were explaining this is just so the viewers have a better context of the business, right? So can you briefly talk about what were you marketing and who are these SMBs so that they're a better context of what you are saying? A, and B is what are the channels you spoke about in person and you also spoke about digital, but what were the mix in general and where you think things really worked well and where things is hard, and you can generalize that part of it. Don't have to be very specific to that, but I at least want the audience to understand the context of the discussion in
Surely.
terms of the business and the target audience.
Sure. So, a lot of the business, right, at that stage involved around selling e-commerce logistics to startups and SMBs, right? Um, why is selling to them very different? Because when you work with a large brand, okay, like a Puma or a Reebok, they have supply chain teams. They have people who understand uh, seasonality really well. They are people who understand peak pressures during festival cycles really well. An average SMB does not, right? So they start a business and they start selling online. They start selling on Amazon, Flipkart. They start selling from their own Shopify or WooCommerce website or a Wix website, or they start selling on social media, and they realize the challenges, right, that come with selling online. It's not easy. It doesn't end with, hey, the customer gave me an order and now I've placed this order. You'll have returns, you'll have frauds, you'll have to navigate all of that. You'll have to navigate checkout experiences, you'll have to go through all of that, right? So what I did, right, as a marketer was to primarily speak to this crowd, right? And I'm going to share a few things that I learned along the way about the Indian
Sure.
SME, right? I think one thing that I told you already is that the Indian SMB wants to be attended to, right? Because India is a very hierarchical society in general, and culturally, the more tier two you go, the more richer this SMB is in proportion to everyone else around him. So there's already a certain amount of clout and ego, right? So if you make like 100 crores in Mumbai, it's not a big deal. But if you make 100 crores in Indore, it's a very big deal, right? And you're a very influential
True.
person there. So that matters. And when you're selling to SMBs, you can't unfortunately ever treat them individually like an enterprise business, because obviously your commercials would not work out that way. The second thing that I also learned along the way, which I found very interesting, was that even though it's a cliche, speaking to people in their language helps. So as a product marketer, I did start with very structured marketing communication where, I did all the usual hooks and CTAs and, showing people very structured imagery. And then I realized what was working was maybe just putting like a box and writing something on it in Hindi, right? So the simpler my creatives were, the less fancier they were, the more organic they were, the more they spoke to the person, right? It did well. And I mean, in hindsight, right, it does work for consumers in the FMCG space, right? So when you speak to somebody you want to lure to buy a chocolate biscuit, you speak to them very like casually, right? But when you sell to e-commerce businesses, you speak in very, stinted ways. You speak, you talk features, and then I think after a point of time I just said no speaking features. Talk to this person as if he's a real 45-year-old man, right, who's inherited his father's business and is now selling on Amazon and Shopify and hates you because he gets a lot of returns. Like, think of this person as a real person, right? Because these were the people I was speaking to all the
True. Yeah.
time. So speaking to people in their language is very important. Channel is very interesting to me, Jaydeep, because channel, I realized, was very consumer. Okay. So I think, I mean, I'm not going to talk about retention marketing here. And I'm, just going to talk about the acquisition aspect of SMBs, right? So
Yeah, but I
when,
do want to touch upon the retention marketing. So bring it up when you think is an appropriate time or
yes,
appropriate
I will,
example, right?
right
Because
after this. So from
that's an
an
area that where even I also worked. So it will be interesting to
I'm
talk
very
about
fond of
retention.
mowing gauge. I've used mowing gauge twice in my career. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll come
So
to
for me, it was
retention.
more engaged, and then I was also managing customer success. So it was like even double,
Oh, interesting.
both in product and the role.
Very interesting. So what I was telling you was, in terms of acquisition, I realized SMBs function just like consumers. So you don't need to do cold calling, you don't need to do email marketing, you don't need to do LinkedIn advertising to them. Reaching them on YouTube works really well. Reaching them on
Hmm.
Instagram works really well. And influencer marketing was an extremely important lever. It did really well. When I started doing influencer marketing for SMBs, I struggled. I actually worked with a fabulous agency, who somehow, despite how much of a tyrant I was to them, because I kept telling them, find me SMBs, find me somebody who will speak in Telugu about e commerce businesses, find me someone who will speak, about, returns and frauds in Punjabi, right? And these guys actually struggled with it, and they found us people who could do that and who were actually local experts. So I realized that influence plays a very big role, because when you're a SMB, community is everything. Net worth is not as important as network, right? Because all SMBs talk to each other all the time, right?
Hmm.
So if one SMB tells you that, hey, I'm struggling with this payment gateway, or I'm struggling with this checkout service, five other SMBs will say I had a bad experience, and then the sixth guy will not buy your product. And of course, all buyers are influenced by community. Say, marketers as an ICP, or finance managers as an ICP, or HR managers as an ICP make decisions in silos. SMBs make decisions jointly, because when you're like 20 businesses in Jalandhar together, you all talk to each other and you do what each one of you is doing. Okay. so
Correct.
so it's a very different ball game, and I realized that in terms of acquisition, that this is
Yeah.
what really works well. And after a point of
So
time, I treated it as consumer marketing.
so in was marketing managing the acquisition or onboarding part as well,
Yes.
or okay, because that is an important aspect of continuation, right? So with acquisition comes retention. So was retention also was part of that package?
100%. 100%. And I have to tell you, I have done fabulous retention campaigns, if I may say so myself. Jokes apart, I mean, I think the team did like such a fabulous job with retention. And half of retention is how good your sales ops team is,
Hmm.
also, right? Because you need to understand who you're chasing. If you're chasing the wrong person, the best crafted message will not work. So I just want to give a shout out to my amazing sales ops and sales team, really. But we did interesting campaigns. Like, we did, very often you think that retention campaigns are, hey, just give a discount and people will come back, or hey, put this much money in their wallet, right, as a cashback, and they'll come back. I mean, we did everything. We did everything from like jerseys during IPL for SMBs, to cashbacks. We did like a lot of incentivization programs, and retention marketing is one of my favorite aspects of marketing, right? Because acquired user ka value, if it's one, a retained user's value is 10, and it's true, right? Retention
Absolutely.
is everything
Absolutely.
in business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think retention for SMBs is a big fat challenge, because
Yeah.
SMBs churn out so much faster, right? They have no
Yeah.
lock-in, they have seasonal businesses, right? They're more flaky, they demand more personal attention. Now, when you are presented with all of that, churn is such an apparent and obvious part of their journey, because I did not have a good experience, and then I will just like drop off and I will go to your competitor. And it's very, very pronounced in SMBs. So, just everything from figuring out patterns of signing up again, patterns of what were the kind of decisions they made, who was the user, right, at their end, who was navigating something like this, right? It made so much difference to the retention journeys, and I've done
Did
everything.
the
I've done.
tool help you with probably
You're the most loyal
personalized?
ex Mo Engage employee. I have to tell you this, Jaideep.
I would like to hope so.
I'm going to send a link of this podcast to the Mo Engage team and say, "Did you guys put Jaideep to this?" No, the tool helps you immensely, right? Data, like, it's not important to just read your sales data every day, and it's not important to just read qualitative interviews from your customers and speak to them. I relied, and I've always relied, very heavily on using the analytics section of my retention tools. So something very basic, like, when people say send emails, okay, or they're making an onboarding flow, so if they send you a WhatsApp message, and then they'll be like, oh, today we're sending a WhatsApp message, so we will send an email the next day after, right? You should not even make that decision without looking at your retention tools analytics. So you go and see what is the fallback, right? Will this person even open this? And if this person not
Correct.
opening the WhatsApp message, you need to send an email right then. Don't say out of
Absolutely.
gut feeling कि मैं एक दिन बाद भेजूंगा because I don't want to spam this user. You better
Yeah.
spam that user right there and then, if he's archived your WhatsApp message, and he's not going to look at it, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, you would look at the fallback channels both in terms of what is the most. I mean, if somebody is not opening email, probably opening a text message, not opening that, maybe opening WhatsApp, so on and so forth. So that is one part. Second is also there is a unit economic, right, in terms of cost. I mean, you would typically look at if somebody is using an app, probably getting
yes,
an
always
in-app
push
message,
an
right?
in-app first, email after that, WhatsApp after that, and SMS as a fallback if nothing's gone, because like it's an OTP channel now primarily. I'm not talking
Right.
RCS. I mean, I have also thoughts on RCS also, but in general, the tool is extremely important, and I would say more than the fact that you use a retention tool to engage and send creative messages,
Right.
analytics, and even more important than analytics is segmentation. So I, for instance, have heavily relied on RFM segmentation, right? You need to know
Absolutely.
who's hibernating, you need to know this guy is gonna go out, you need to know who your loyalists are, and sometimes you make very counterintuitive decisions, and you can play around and see, you can decide, hey, out in my RFM segmentation, I am just going to go after my loyalists, and I'm going to do everything in the world to make them happy, because they will give me volume of business, right?
True. True.
So you can play around with it so much, and hence I
Yeah.
love retention marketing. I
Yeah.
actually enjoy talking to people about retention a lot.
And I
um,
think in D2C business and SMB business, what I also have seen is that there is a word of mouth, right? So if someone is really happy and engaged, right, there's a chances that it's a community, like at the end of the day, you mentioned, right? They might actually talk about that in the larger circle that they hang around with. Especially, I think in tier two, tier three, probably it'll be even more. The possibility is a lot more. Other thing I've noticed, retention plays an important role in even in unit economics, right? We have seen clients, you're paying user acquisition cost anywhere in the range of $3 to $4 or $5 sometimes, and then the customer is not coming back to purchase again your product. And I'm talking about B2C. There are brands that we work with, don't want to name, but so the investors are looking at, right, in terms of what is your day 7, day 10, day 15, why are not they coming back? Is that the product is the issue? Is the offers are not good? Because the whole idea that you try to do is to get them to come back to you. For and in some cases, I'm sure in SMB's case or D2C's case, you want to create those occasions, you want to create those offers that the stickiness improves. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I think this is a very interesting thing, right? Like, we don't think of retaining a business in the same way as retaining a consumer. But if you look at it from a first principle perspective, what makes someone stick around? And the answer to that is unfortunately not marketing. The answer to that is product and customer experience, right?
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
a lot of D2C brands will continue to struggle till they don't have novelty in their product, right? So you look at any D2C brand that's really done well and that's stuck out, it's either done so by virtue of design, right? So for instance, Mokobara has said distinctly design. It's done so by virtue of a positioning. So Zook only sells to women who are in corporate jobs, largely in urban cities, and so on, right? So I think it does make so much difference to realize that whether it's a SMB that you're trying to retain or a consumer, if your product is not good, people will not come back. And if it's good, people will do the selling for you. And I've seen this happen with the whole truth so much because everybody keeps telling me to have their whey protein. And I'm very tired of being recommended it now. But it's a great product, it's a clean
It is.
product. It's
It is.
driven by a team that obviously is very clearly honest, right? And that works for them, and it's a retention strategy. Now, you don't think of the fact that labeling and packaging can be a retention strategy, but it is, right? Because that is what spurs word of mouth in the long run. So I think I enjoy the fact that, in consumer businesses, you do short term retention hacks, right? Like, I mean, you do, hey, you dropped off while booking your flight and here's a coupon code. But it won't matter if, the flight experience is not good. People will switch off, right? So,
Any shelf product for that matter, the packaging will always play an important
yeah.
role, and because there is obviously a neuroscience and a whole behavioral psychology that plays out, right? Absolutely. So I just want to switch gear at this point of time, but before I do that, talk about a little bit about your data driven sort of experience, because data has become a very key thing and you touched upon it very briefly there, especially while doing your listening to customer feedback and listening to what market is saying and so on. And you also spoke about in the context of Moengage's RFMS, and that's also very much related to your analytics and segmentation and data, so on. So in SMB D2C space versus your corporate role, right? The larger corporations, any sort of difference that you see in terms of how organizations today are using data
Yeah.
to, especially in the B2B space, and then D2C and maybe SMB space.
So, one experience I have had is that I see that the obsession with data is very much obviously like a large brand and a corporate phenomena. And it's obvious because large brands care about incrementality, right? So when you're at 60% market share, you want to figure data points that will move you to like 63%, right? But when you're 0.002% of the market, you don't care to move
Yeah.
to 2%, right? Very different spaces to be, right? So I'm sure like my friends who are marketers at like Mondelez and Nestle and all of these places, they're hugely motivated by data driven marketing and incrementality. When I work with smaller brands, they're not, right? Because they're fighting for life and they're fighting for survival and they're fighting for impact. So it's a very different space, right? They want to make sure that the pitch deck that's shown to their potential enterprise client is the best ever. And it's a very different sort of like headspace. However, from my own perspective, am I a hugely data driven marketer? No. I am an extremely gut driven marketer, but I train my gut immensely, which means that I constantly reflect on every campaign I've done. I constantly reflect on tools I've used, on how I even dealt with stakeholders. And this is something that, like, one of my earliest bosses taught me, and it stuck with me. She used to document everything with herself. Like, she pretended that, you know, she was a boss and she was a company and she was everything, and she would write everything down and then reflect upon it, and it's something I learned from her and I do it as well. So I train my gut by going through what happened and what did not happen. I don't train my gut by looking at CTR, and I don't train my gut by looking at CPC. I am sort of in one of those marketers who's not very enamored by tooling. Obviously, any tool will have its own conflict of interest in terms of what they want to sell and what their algorithms will dictate. So I avoid obsessing with tools. I do like tools that help you fast track creation or help you fast track research, and that's good. But I'm not very obsessed with understanding the CTR and CPC and the bounce rate so much, as much as the implication of what that means, right? So I would
Mm,
rather pick up the phone and talk to somebody who tried logging in twice and then
mm,
kept dropping off at the same time, and I will ask what happened. I will not
mm,
like look at that as an aggregate metric, and I
mm.
enjoy that aspect of marketing where I like analytics, and which is why I like retention tools, right? Because I want to see like the user path and the journey, and I want to
Mm,
put logic key. Okay, if somebody spent more than 20,000 a month on my product, right? What are, where are they from? What was their journey like? And if there's somebody who spends only this much, right? How does it differ from their journey? So I like doing that kind of A/B
got it.
testing.
Got it. So for if SMB or for D2C, let's just say, I mean, you worked with again, I think, I believe more than one 0 to 1 sort of startups. So I'm very curious to know that what are the right initial marketing strategy channel tactics that you think are for those stage of companies, because that's, I think there are a lot of debate and confusion there, and especially among the startup founders mind, right? Do you advise people to go all organic? Do you say that, okay, no, you need to have, obviously if you are going for a D2C kind of an environment, or maybe even B2C, then of course paid, of course, is there's no other way other than paid. But in a B2B kind of startup, right, 0 to 1, what are the essential tactics, strategies to start with, and where should startups should focus on?
Very interesting. So I have most of my work with B2B 0 to 1 was when I was working in venture capital and when I was providing portfolio support. Um,
And this is part of that
yes,
IMA, right?
yes,
Okay,
yes. And I still do actually a lot of work with incubators. So for instance, like
sure.
I work with Innovation Mission Punjab for their
Hmm.
market research and validation portions and so on. Jaideep, to be very honest, the answer, I know everybody hates it, but it depends. It depends on what your strengths are. So, for instance, if you're a very well networked founder, I will just tell
Hmm.
you to do community and personal branding.
Hmm.
Because in the short run, that is what is going to get you noticed and get you visibility, right? If you're somebody who's maybe a very smart person, but maybe a nobody in terms of network, right? Then I would say do XYZ, right? And
Hmm.
maybe if you are somebody who is not comfortable with a tactic where you want to spend a lot of money, then I'll say, okay, if you don't want to spend money and then you just want to rely on free content, very difficult. We need to do something which is a little outlandish, right? So the answer really is it depends. And very often, unfortunately, having worked with so many founders, you have to do what the founder says, right? In early years of my career, I used to resist that very strongly because I was like, this is the wrong strategy. Why don't you do it this way? The way I now look at it is that, okay, do what the founder says, but what is the best version that you can give him of what he wants, right? So
Hmm.
if the founder says कि मुझे कुछ नहीं करना, I'm not going to do anything, तुम बस आ दो, right? What is the best version of performance marketing I can do for him? And if the founder says, hey bro, I don't have money, but I want people to talk about me on Twitter and LinkedIn, right? Then what do I help him say that will get like disproportionate attention compared to business as usual? So now I look at it from that angle, but there is no
Got it.
sacrosanct strategy. I like what a lot of brands do. I think Sairam has been using real style videos on LinkedIn.
Yeah, he has been doing that. I am also
And I
noticing that.
really like
Yeah.
it. I mean, it works because I think,
Yeah.
you know,
He will stand in the bay and just
yeah.
talk about something very coolly, right?
Yeah, and it's something I always associated with D2C brands, but he's doing it so well for a
Yeah.
B2B brand.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. So you are a consultant now, and this is a question that intrigues me because I have gone through a phase like that. Quitting a full-time job and taking up a consulting role can always be unnerving, right? And I know for years, maybe for decades, people keep thinking about it, but they cannot plunge. So what worked for you, and what do you think about it? I just want to quickly know what is your take on that.
So I
Did you
think
go through
what
such emotions?
Yeah, no, I did not. Okay. And I have to tell you, I wish, well for everybody who decides to take the plunge. It's never an easy plunge. It's an extremely difficult decision. There is something so beautiful about the stability of getting a credit every month, which you only realize when you're not getting
Oh
that
yes.
credit, right? So I have a lot of
Hmm.
respect for every single person who chooses not to consult or do something on their own. I think we celebrate too many freelancers and founders, but we don't really celebrate people who are doing something within the four walls or whatever they've been forced to do, right? So
Hmm.
a I think I did not look at it like that because I did not romanticize freelance life. So one of the first things that I did when I started consulting was that whatever I have learned over the years of sort of being independent, I actually put it down into a playbook, right? And it's a playbook that now I've given to like a bunch of freelancers, and a lot of freelancers have come back and told me that they've used it.
So, Ayushi, I wanted to also talk about the other side of your marketing work or corporate work, consulting work. You also have a bigger side that I see, at least on LinkedIn, what I have seen, that's a public platform, that you have been sort of teaching, mentoring, coaching, and in some way, like doing a bit of career counseling as well, sharing tips, sharing templates, sharing tools. So that's a big work, in my opinion. What drives you to do that, this pro bono stuff? You're very passionate about it, looks like.
I think I enjoy doing it because I had no one do it for me. And I don't want anyone to feel clueless or lost as I was. And this is my way of ensuring that if somebody is proactive, right, and they take the effort to read some content, attend a class, they will get the guidance that they need. So a lot of my giving back is very motivated by the fact that, I've not had like very strong and direct role models. Of course, I've had role models, but they've not been direct career role models, right? And I think I just wanted people to understand nuances of what everyday work life is like. So everybody will tell you, for instance, follow your passion, and people will tell you like big life advice, but nobody will
True.
ever tell you how should you maybe work in the first 30 days of joining a new place, which is what you really need. You need everyday professional advice. And I think the joy of doing content for me on LinkedIn is that I enjoy putting things like that which will help people in an everyday manner. And I write from the heart. So I write whatever I think is, something that I feel strongly about.
I wish everyone had such heart to write such beautiful stuff. But anyway,
I just write
like
like
you said,
whatever
you
comes
write
to
all
me.
original stuff, right? They are not chat GPT generated. All right. So, yeah, no. So, on that, it's a good segue to ask. So, what would you advise a 21-year-old Ayushi
So
if they
I
were starting the career now, today?
I actually started my career when I was 16, you know. Uh,
Maybe 16. Let me change that age.
Yeah, I actually went to evening college and I would
Okay.
work through my undergrad, and I
Yeah.
joined
I
Access.
noticed you went to St. Xavier's in
Yeah, I
Calcutta,
went to
right?
Xavier's Evening College, and
Mm.
I joined Access when I was 20. So, so for me, if I look back at like 21-year-old me or 16-year-old me, I think, just say that, you know, respect and cherish everyone that you work with. Just because people have different perspectives does not mean that and those perspectives differ from you does not mean that they don't respect you, or you don't need to value them. I think it's very important because young people, and I mean, I now when I run into very young people at work, youth is wasted upon the young. So very brash, full of energy, but they won't listen to anyone, and I also did not listen to anyone. And I wish I'd been a better listener. So what I would just tell like a 21-year-old Ayushi is that be a better listener, right? So if someone is 50, they've done this for 25, 30 years more than you. So, just because you have energy or you know something does not make you better than them. uh, the other thing that maybe I would also tell like a 21-year-old Ayushi is that, if you help a man climb a mountain, you also get to the top. So, in all our lives, we've all been taught to be having main character energy, and everyone wants to be a hero, and everyone wants to be CEO, right? And we're all taught, just be that one person on top, and that pinnacle of success is the pinnacle. But I think there's so much pride, joy, enjoyment, and I mean, in general, money and respect also in being an enabler. And marketers are enablers. We are
Yeah,
the most
yeah.
selfless of
Rainmaker.
enablers. Rainmakers, yeah. So I would say that
Absolutely.
it's okay. It's good to be an enabler. You don't need to be the
Mm.
hero of every story. Help the right man climb to the mountain, and you will also reach to the top.
Very well said. Very well said. So, before I wrap up, wanted to ask you, what do you do to keep yourself updated, fresh? What do you read? Where do you read? What do you listen? Any suggestions? Any thoughts?
So I am a huge bibliophile and I love reading. So my favorite form of consumption of information is still like text and reading. I don't listen to podcasts, though I've run corporate podcasts for brands and businesses I worked with, and I've also done like my own podcast, but I don't personally enjoy learning from podcasts, right? I can maybe listen to them, when you're on a drive or when you're doing chores. From a learning perspective, I think two, three sources that have changed my life. I think I'll talk about blogs first because blogs are easier for maybe people listening to this podcast who don't read books. Avinash Kaushik's Occam's
Yeah.
Razor, which is the definitive blog on marketing analytics in the world. If you have not read his blog,
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry, you don't know anything about marketing analytics.
Yes.
I have been I, every,
Started learning about analytics from his blog, actually, to be
yes.
honest.
I
I
mean,
think people hardly heard about that word when he started writing about it in Google, right?
yeah. So, and fabulous. It does not matter आप brand marketer हो, agency में काम करते हो, you're a SaaS marketer, you're a consultant, you're a CMO, you're a fresh. Read Avinash's blogs. They literally separate the trees from the forest every time I read anything he
True,
writes, right? So
true.
he's one. Another person who I almost like think has been very pivotal in my own journey is, so out of all the roles I've held, I've done digital the most because
Okay.
obviously if you're a marketer today, you do digital in every role, and I've done performance marketing as a specialization twice by now. Jagdish, who writes very very actively on LinkedIn, right, is somebody I sort of consider like my performance marketing and digital marketing guru. He's also a fractional growth consultant and a digital marketing consultant. Anybody who wants to, I mean, just reading what he's written on his blog or reading like the last 2 years of his LinkedIn content will make you top 1% of digital marketers in the country today. And I think fabulous, fabulous, fabulous blog content. I do wish more Indian marketers wrote blogs. The
Hmm.
thing that I really like about a lot of US based marketers is that, I mean, everything from like a why we buy, to Julie, all of these people, right? They all write what they're doing. Indian marketers
Hmm.
don't do that. Indian marketers do the work, then they go for award ceremonies to FEs and cans and all of that, but they don't actually do like a lot of knowledge generation. Uh, yeah, and I think that's very sad. But a couple of people who are Mycons, and because I'm a Mycon, I'll say it. Pratik Malpani, who's now at ACO and was previously at Wakefit, I think he wrote a blog very briefly, and I really enjoyed reading his perspective.
Hmm.
Kaushik Subramaniam, who was at L'Oreal and then went to like McKinsey, Meta, etc., and is a Mycon, used to have a blog called Horn Okay Please, which he wrote with another FMCG marketer called Anupriya, if I'm not mistaken. And I learned a lot of like FMCG sales and distribution basics when I just graduated from MICA then. So what I'm trying to tell anybody who's listening and who's very serious about learning is that, when you graduate out of college, read something at a different level. When you're in a leadership position, read something at a different level, and that evolves. So I would say those are like my blog sources. I love books, so I pretty much recommend everyone to read a lot, even though most people today apparently claim that they don't have the attention span for it. But reading is an extremely joyous way to learn, if because it just switches you off from everything else, right? So you're not
Yeah,
getting five
yeah,
notifications on your phone when you're reading.
yeah.
Books that I would recommend, I love Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. I reread it every year since I was introduced to it, because I just love the idea of the fact that the opposite of a good idea can also be a good idea. And it's a very important thing to remember in marketing discussions, right? So in marketing, you will very often find that people ask very stupid questions like this: hey, should we go after an Instagram influencer who has 7 million followers, or should we get like 700 nano influencers who have 1,000, 10,000 followers each, right? And then somebody will do like a lot of brain storming around it. But both can be good ideas. And I think Alchemy is a wonderful book and everyone should read it. I love Sudhir Sitapathi's The CEO Factory, and I think all marketers should read it, irrespective of whether they're FMCG marketers or not, because a lot of the book and the journey of the kind of mindset, perseverance, how to build brands that last 200, 300 years and still stay relevant is so wonderful again to read. Also, recently, the first book I read this year and like really enjoyed was this book called Essentialism, which is about prioritization. And since I read it, I have been recommending everyone to read it. Please read it if you're a
So,
marketer.
so one of the things probably I'm going to ask you after this recording is to share this list, and I'm going to add that to our show note,
Yes, I will. I
so
will
that
share a
so
maybe
that
a
our
list of
viewers.
5, 10 more books apart from that.
Awesome, awesome. I think that's going to be great because then they'll have the list together, and I'll have the list too.
Yes. So yes, a bunch of these books for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, I read a lot, and you are completely failing as a marketer if you've not learned anything new this week. Is what I would say. Marketing really changes that fast.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I can tell you, because I'm a full stack marketer. I read every single update that Google and Meta roll out. I also read content changes. I read any improvements in content. I literally am active on every social media channel, and I make time to see what's trending. You can't live without learning if you're a marketer. If you're a marketer, sign up for a life of learning.
Awesome. Awesome. I think with that, that's a good segue to ask you, where can people find you
I'm
on
most
social
active on
media?
LinkedIn. I'm on
I'll add your LinkedIn details on the show note. Any other channels?
I am semi active on Twitter. Last year,
Okay.
I became very active on Twitter, and then I realized I went viral a few times. And then my friends started sending me screenshots from Instagram meme pages. So I thought I should stop. So now I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. And
Okay.
everywhere else, of course, I'm active to absorb how people are consuming content. So I'm active on Insta, Reddit as a marketer, but as a
Mhm.
creator, I'm only active on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Okay. So I'll add all of these details, especially your LinkedIn handle and the list of books that you recommended, the show note. So with that, we'll wrap up. It is such a nice conversation that I had with you. I think we touched upon so many things, and I wish that we continue this discussion maybe in the coming, probably sooner than later, near future. We'll again chat up, considering that there is so much of changes happening, and I think by another 6 months or a year, we'll probably have a lot more to again catch up. But thank you so much for your time, Ayushi, and it was a pleasure talking to you today.
No, thank you, Jaideep. And I think time flew by. So,
Absolutely.
so I hope that anybody and everybody who listens to this podcast also feels that time flew by for them. And thank you so much for having me once again.